It was supposed to be a fairy tale comeback, a live-action revival of one of the most iconic princesses in cinematic history. Instead, Disney's Snow White remake has become a brand crisis, a pop culture punchline, and a career-threatening scandal, all wrapped in the sparkliest poisoned apple Hollywood's bitten into in years. And now, with retailers pulling merch off shelves, box office numbers in freefall, and Rachel Zegler reportedly breaking down in tears, the real story isn't just about one bad movie. It's about how far a studio giant can fall when it loses sight of its audience, and the cost of casting a princess who didn't believe in the kingdom. Let's unpack the latest fallout in this ever-expanding disaster. Before we dive into one of the most bizarre and chilling mysteries to ever hit Hollywood, make sure to subscribe if you love deep dives into unsolved cases, hidden truths, and shocking celebrity mysteries. Trust me, this one is going to leave you speechless. Disney's worst nightmare, playing out in real time. Across major retail chains and online platforms, Snow White products have quietly disappeared. Action figures, costume dresses, branded lunchboxes, all gone or heavily discounted. Independent stores have even confirmed to media outlets that they preemptively pulled merchandise after customer feedback became overwhelmingly negative. That's not just bad PR, it's a loss of confidence in the brand. Disney Consumer Products was expecting Snow White to be the next big princess line, projected to drive over $100 million in annual retail revenue. Instead, it's a write-off. One retailer put it bluntly, "We're not going to stock inventory that invites backlash. It's not worth the risk." Let that sink in. A Disney princess product is now considered brand toxic. As the criticism reached a fever pitch, reports emerged that Rachel Zegler had an emotional moment during a closed-door call with studio representatives. According to multiple entertainment insiders, Zegler tearfully expressed feeling blindsided by the backlash. She allegedly said she felt unsupported by Disney during the press tour, and that she was portraying a character they told her to redefine. While the footage hasn't been made public, leaks from insiders claim she also said, "This was supposed to be the biggest role of my life, and now I feel like the villain." The clip, real or not, has already reignited debate online. Some sympathize with her, calling her a scapegoat for a failing system. Others argue she brought it on herself with smug interviews and tone-deaf commentary. But regardless of how you feel about Rachel, the takeaway is clear: this role broke her instead of made her. And now, the damage may be irreversible. For nearly a century, Disney princesses were safe territory, universally beloved, easy to market, low risk, high return. Until now, the new Snow White took that formula and detonated it. The original story was rewritten beyond recognition. Prince Charming, scrapped. Romance, deemed regressive. Dwarfs, replaced with CGI forest beings. Snow White herself, reframed as a cynical, career-driven revolutionary. And for many fans, especially parents introducing the story to their kids, that wasn't an update. It was a rejection of everything that made the original magical. Even defenders of modern storytelling couldn't ignore the film's tonal whiplash, a clashing blend of Gen Z snark, vague political metaphors, and hollow visual spectacle. In trying to appeal to everyone, the film ended up resonating with no one. Internally, Disney is now dealing with a full-scale corporate freakout. Shareholders are demanding answers, creative executives are turning on each other, and teams that once had green lights for live-action projects reportedly being asked to go back to development and tone down the messaging. The fallout from Snow White is reportedly affecting other upcoming remakes, including Tangled, Moana, and Atlantis. Studios are no longer confident that modernizing these stories with heavy ideological updates is a guaranteed win. Instead, we're seeing a return to basics. Strong characters, emotional arcs, classic fantasy themes. Disney's pivot may already be happening, but the Snow White debacle will cast a long shadow. Rachel Zegler's future in Hollywood? Now a giant question mark. There's no denying she's talented, her performance in West Side Story proved that. But in today's hyper-connected culture, talent alone doesn't guarantee longevity. Public trust matters. And Zegler, fairly or not, is now seen as someone who alienated her audience before the film even hit theaters. Streaming platforms are reportedly cooling on her. Rumors suggest at least one major casting deal was paused in the wake of the Snow White disaster. Even her reps are said to be reevaluating PR strategy, with more emphasis on image rehabilitation and less on advocacy branding. The harsh truth? Zegler was offered a crown, and it may have cost her the kingdom. One of the less talked about consequences of Snow White's implosion is how it exposed the growing hostility toward franchise fatigue. Audiences weren't just bored by this remake, they were offended by its existence. Why? Because it didn't feel like a tribute. It felt like a corporate takeover, a familiar story stuffed into a new algorithm-friendly shape, shoved into theaters under the guise of progress. But audiences have grown smarter. They can see when a film is being made for quarterly earnings, not creative reasons. And after years of sequel slogs, universe-building flops, and hollow reboots, patience has worn thin. Snow White wasn't just another bad remake. It was a breaking point. The moment people collectively said, "We're done watching you butcher the classics just to tick boxes." The message to studios? Nostalgia has an expiration date, and when you misuse it, it turns into resentment. In the pre-2020s model of Hollywood, studios believed they could engineer controversy-proof casting. Hire someone with a social media following, someone with a fan base, someone authentic and outspoken, wrap the whole thing in press-approved messaging and call it a win. Rachel Zegler checked all those boxes, and still? Total implosion. That's causing massive anxiety in casting departments. Because now, there's no such thing as a safe lead. Every actor is one TikTok, group chat leak, or red carpet gaffe away from becoming a liability. Some casting execs are reportedly looking back to a pre-social media model, choosing talent who aren't online, who don't build a brand around activism or politics, and who focus solely on the role. Others are going the opposite way, leaning into polarizing personalities and preparing for backlash as a built-in feature of marketing. What's certain is this: Zegler's arc has completely rewired how studios think about star power. And now, every actor being considered for a major IP is being judged not just on performance, but on PR volatility. While much of the focus has been on box office and merchandising, there's another corner of Disney's empire being gutted quietly: publishing and licensing. Plans for tie-in storybooks, junior novelizations, coloring books, and companion apps featuring Rachel Zegler's Snow White have been either scrapped entirely, rewritten to remove her likeness, or rebranded under the original. Publishing insiders say that Zegler's public perception became so radioactive that bookstores began declining pre-orders from suppliers before the backlash even hit peak. This doesn't just cost Disney money, it fractures the cross-platform synergy they rely on. When the movie feeds the books feed the parks feed the streaming content, and so on. With the new Snow White, that whole machine has short-circuited. Disney is also reportedly grappling with what some internal staffers are calling an algorithmic embarrassment. What does that mean? Basically, Snow White may become the first major Disney remake to be deprioritized by Disney POC's own AI content strategy. No homepage carousel placement, no push notifications, no because you watched recommendation, no featured thumbnails in international markets. Instead, the streaming release could be soft-launched, meaning it will be uploaded quietly without press, fanfare, or digital marketing. Why? Because the film's name is now synonymous with audience backlash, and platform data suggests users are less likely to click on content associated with controversy. In other words, Snow White isn't just being pulled from shelves, it's being buried by the algorithm. Let's shift to Disney's other golden goose, the parks. Theme parks are usually the backbone of any major film rollout. New rides, character appearances, themed snacks, everything designed to immerse guests in the latest Disney magic. But with Snow White, total freeze. Meet and greets featuring the updated Snow White design? Canceled. A rumored parade float? Never left concept art? Princess photo ops at Disneyland and Disney World? Still using the classic 1937 costume with zero reference to the remake. Park insiders report that leadership made a decision: we're not bringing controversy into the parks. Because unlike streaming or film, the parks have a higher bar for guest satisfaction. One parent complaining about Zegler's Snow White being pushed on their kid? That's a brand risk Disney will not tolerate. So instead, the new Snow White doesn't exist there. And that's about as close to an internal erasure as Disney ever gets. Perhaps the most important long-term ripple from this disaster: what it's doing to the creative community. Writers, directors, and showrunners, especially those in the indie and mid-budget space, are finally feeling empowered to speak out against reboot culture. Privately, some are telling their agents, "Don't pitch me on legacy projects. I want to build something new." There's a growing sentiment that remakes are now career traps, projects that start with fan excitement and end with internet mobs. And studio execs? They're listening. The Zegler fallout is already being cited in pitch rooms as a reason to go original, to take risks on new worlds, new characters, and new voices, rather than shoving modern messaging into old stories that were never meant to carry that weight. Finally, here's the ultimate sign that Snow White's failure has gone academic. Film schools and think tanks are already dissecting it. Courses on franchise development and cultural studies are reportedly adding Snow White 2025 to their curriculum as a cautionary case study. Misaligned audience targeting, brand overreach, the limits of ideological storytelling, star management gone wrong, the risks of weaponized nostalgia. One professor in New York was quoted saying, "This isn't just a failed film, it's a cultural artifact. 10 years from now, people will cite this moment as the day Disney lost its footing." It's rare for a movie to crash this hard. It's even rarer for its impact to echo into academic and corporate spaces simultaneously. But that's what happens when a remake meant to define an era becomes the face of what went wrong with it. One of the most fascinating developments post-release. Rachel Zegler's radio silence. After a press tour that saw her in every media outlet, podcast and red carpet, Zegler has all but vanished. Her social media has gone eerily quiet, no formal statements, no Instagram explanations, no Notes app apology. And while silence might seem like a smart PR move in the middle of a firestorm, in Zegler's case, it's backfiring. Why? Because the backlash wasn't just about what she said, it was about how she carried herself. And when people perceive that someone came off as dismissive, condescending, or hostile to the source material, silence reads not as dignity, but as disdain. Fans feel like their complaints are being ignored, critics feel emboldened, and would-be defenders are stuck with nothing to work with. In a media climate where owning the moment often wins sympathy, Rachel's retreat has turned into a vacuum that's only being filled by more outrage. Here's something truly wild. The Snow White fiasco is now being used in pitch meetings. According to multiple entertainment insiders, studio execs are starting to throw around a new phrase during development meetings. Does this pass the Snow White test? What does that mean? Basically, before greenlighting a project, especially a remake or reboot, decision makers are asking, will this trigger a fan revolt? Does the talent understand the IP's legacy? Is the creative team going to modernize it in a way that alienates the base? It's not official policy, yet, but when a single project causes this much reputational damage, it becomes a ghost in the room at every development table. Ironically, Snow White may end up saving future remakes from making the same mistakes. While the studio version of Snow White sinks, something else is rising: fan-made reinterpretations. Across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, creators are now putting out their own visions of the classic tale: unedited monologues, AI-rendered posters, trailers with alternative casts, even rewritten plot outlines. One viral video reimagined Snow White as a whimsical musical in the style of The Princess Bride, garnering millions of views and comments like, "This 60-second fan edit had more charm than the entire 250." This movement isn't just artistic, it's rebellion. It's fans reclaiming a story they feel was taken from them and reshaped into something unrecognizable. And that response matters, because in 2025, fan culture is culture. If your audience is rebuilding your IP without you, it means they've lost trust in your ability to do it right. While the public watches the marketing side of Disney scramble, morale within the creative departments has reportedly hit a historic low. Sources from inside Walt Disney Studios say that animators, writers, and mid-level staffers are frustrated not just because of Snow White, but because of a growing feeling that the creative pulse of Disney has been replaced by corporate paranoia. Several writers say they're being pushed to add meaningful representation without real narrative integration, resulting in hollow characters who exist only to fulfill diversity checklists. Others feel their creative choices are constantly overridden by executive-level brand guardians who don't actually understand the storytelling process. One insider reportedly said, "It's like trying to write poetry while someone's yelling analytics over your shoulder." Snow White didn't cause this atmosphere, but it sure exposed it. There's something darker brewing under the surface at Disney. A quiet conversation about long-term damage to one of its oldest and most iconic characters. Internally, executives are assessing whether Snow White as a brand can still anchor merchandise lines, theme park promotions, or seasonal events. That's unheard of. In the past, even when a Disney project failed, the character still endured. But now, the new version has been so poorly received that it's casting a shadow over the entire legacy. Licensing partners are reportedly hesitant to approve any Snow White-related projects without a clear visual and tonal return to the original. This isn't just a movie failure, it's brand trauma. And recovery from that takes more than time. It takes a narrative reset. Here's a twist no one saw coming. The youngest generation doesn't care about this remake at all. Disney's marketing team had hoped that Snow White 2025 would connect with Gen Alpha, the kids who are currently 6 to 14 years old. But according to analytics and audience feedback, they're skipping it. Merchandise aimed at that age group is sitting untouched. Disney Plus test screenings with kids resulted in lukewarm responses. YouTube reaction channels report low engagement on trailers and clips. Why? Because Gen Alpha doesn't recognize this Snow White. They aren't emotionally connected to the 1937 film or to Rachel Zegler's version. And in an era where Bluey, Wednesday, and Encanto dominate their screens, Snow White 2025 felt irrelevant. This might be the most damaging insight of all. A remake meant to be timeless is being ignored by the very kids it was made for. Believe it or not, this controversy is now affecting completely unrelated princesses. Studio sources say that development on Moana 2 and Tiana, the upcoming series and potential film continuation, has been subject to nervous rewrites since Snow White's backlash. Why? Because no one wants another ideology-first disaster. Teams are being told to focus more on core story structure and emotional relatability and to avoid any marketing language that could be interpreted as preachy or antagonistic. Even Frozen 3, already in early development, has reportedly had script adjustments to shift tone closer to the Frozen 1 formula. Zegler's film may have only involved one character, but the reverberations are affecting an entire generation of Disney princesses. Disney is at a crossroads, and they know it. Do they double down on this current trajectory? Do they keep recasting and rewriting their legacy with modern politics and ironic detachment? Or do they pause, reassess, and return to the core principles that made their stories timeless in the first place? The problem? No one inside the company seems to agree. Younger creatives want to push forward. Veteran voices are calling for a return to wonder. Executives are caught in the middle, terrified of being labeled regressive, but more terrified of another $250 million faceplant. What's next? We don't know yet. But one thing's certain, whatever they choose, the world will be watching. Disney's Snow White remake was meant to mark a new era of princess stories, progressive, powerful, and reimagined for a new generation. Instead, it's become a parody of studio overreach, a masterclass in what happens when a company confuses branding for storytelling, and forgets that fairy tales at their best speak from the heart, not a checklist. The magic mirror has spoken, and the reflection, staring back, is one of broken trust, lost billions, and a once promising actress now fighting to reclaim her narrative. Disney's lesson? When you rewrite a classic, don't forget why it worked in the first place.